Just a programming note, I had told you that the SG's press conference was tentatively scheduled for the 18th. We're trying to move it up by a few days because I know there's some scheduling conflict on the 18th of September. Good afternoon. Speaking of the Secretary General, he is in the People's Republic of China today, in Beijing, where he attended the welcoming ceremonies for the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Earlier today, he met with Ding Xuexiang, the Vice Premier of China, and also met with the UN country team. Tomorrow, he will speak at the forum's opening ceremony, where he will underscore that South-South cooperation is essential to build capacities and drive progress on our shared development goals. He will also reiterate the United Nations' full engagement in support of a strong China-Africa partnership towards a shared goal of peace, sustainable development, and human rights on a healthy planet. This afternoon, the Security Council of the United Nations will meet at 3 p.m. in the chambers to discuss the situation in the Middle East following a request made in a letter from the permanent representative of Israel. The Undersecretary General for Peacebuilding and Political Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, will brief. Also briefing will be Edem Wasornu, the Director of Operations for OCHA. Turning to the situation in Gaza, as you will have seen, the World Health Organization announced today that the first phase of the polio vaccination campaign in Gaza has now been completed. Dr. Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, said over 187,000 children under the age of 10 were vaccinated. He added that preparations are underway to roll out the vaccination campaign in South Gaza, which will start tomorrow. UNICEF said the pause must continue to implement the remaining phases of the campaign. Otherwise, we will fail to protect the children of Gaza and place other children at risk. Also on the health front, the Ministry of Health of Gaza announced earlier this week the completion of the new emergency department at Al-Shifa Hospital in the northern part of Gaza. However, health facilities in Gaza continue to be severely affected by the ongoing hostilities, access constraints, and lack of supplies, including fuel. Moving to the West Bank, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says the large-scale operation carried out by Israeli forces in the north of the West Bank are continuing. In just 1 week, many Palestinian civilians have been killed, including 7 children, making it the highest number of Palestinians killed in a single week in the West Bank since November of last year. Our humanitarian colleagues remind us that in the West Bank, Israeli forces must adhere to international and law enforcement standards, where lethal force and firearms are last resort and used only against imminent threats of death or serious injury. We also want to reiterate that humanitarian access must be allowed and unhindered. Tomorrow, the senior UN humanitarian let's do this again. Just a quick update on Sigrid Kaag and her activities. On Monday, she met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as Foreign Minister Israel Katz and Minister for Strategic Affairs Ron Dremer. Those meetings took place in Jerusalem. She raised, among other topics, measures to address the dramatic humanitarian situation in Gaza, progress on implementation of the polio vaccination campaign, as well as the rehabilitation of essential services. On Tuesday, she met with Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa and other senior officials of the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, with whom she also discussed the humanitarian issues and reconstructions of Gaza, as well as the need for the Palestinian Authority to resume its responsibilities in the Gaza Strip. And on Syria, just a bit more of an update than I gave you yesterday. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that half of all health facilities in the northwest of Syria are at risk of closure by the end of the year. OCHA warns that health services are being scaled back due to underfunding. This year's appeal has only received 26% of the $4.1 billion needed to help nearly 11 million people in need of assistance across the country. This is happening as hostilities continue to have an impact on civilians across Syria. We already updated you on the situation in the northeastern parts of the country. Yesterday, in the northwest, in Aleppo, several civilians, including 6 children and 3 women, were injured on Monday when hostilities impacted a market in Aleppo. And of course, we continue to underscore that civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected at all times by all combatants. And moving to Ukraine, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that another wave of deadly attacks struck the country today in Lviv, in Lviv City, a regional center in western Ukraine and home to many displaced people. That city suffered one of the deadliest attacks since the escalation of the war. According to the authorities, at least 7 civilians were killed, 64 more residents were injured, including 10 children. More than 50 homes and at least 4 education and health facilities were damaged. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the Kryvyi Rih in the center of the country was also impacted by strikes today, with local authorities reporting dozens of civilians injured, including children, and a number of schools were also damaged. Immediately after the attacks, aid workers started providing medical and psychological support to the impacted people. Meanwhile, our humanitarian chief in Ukraine, Matthias Schmale, is on a field mission to Poltava today. Yesterday, he was in Kharkiv. Mr. Schmale said today he condemned the latest attacks impacting civilians and civilian infrastructure and expressed his condolences to the families of the victims. Turning to Libya, following consultations hosted by the UN political mission in Libya at its headquarters in Tripoli, those took place yesterday and Monday. The representatives of the House of Representatives and High Council of State reached an important understanding on the crisis of the Central Bank of Libya, particularly on the mechanisms and timelines for appointing the central bank's governor, as well as its board of directors. The representatives of the 2 chambers requested an additional period of 5 days to complete the consultations towards a final consensus on the arrangements of the management of the Central Bank of Libya until a new governor and board of director are appointed. The UN mission commends the climate of cooperation that prevailed in the consultations with the representatives of both chambers on one hand and the representatives of the Presidential Council on the other. And the mission also called on all parties to fulfill their obligations, and that is to refrain from any unilateral decisions and actions, and calls on them to intensify efforts to reach an agreement without any delay. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, our human rights colleagues from the peacekeeping mission there tell us they're concerned by developments at a prison in the capital city of Kinshasa. According to Congolese authorities, during an escape attempt earlier this week, dozens of inmates were killed, including by bullets and by being trampled. Our colleagues say that prior to these events, more than 15,000 people were held at this prison, which was built to accommodate only 1,500 inmates. They welcome the opening of an inquiry by the authorities and call on them to bring to justice those responsible for crimes and human rights violations. As part of its mandate, the UN Human Rights Office in the Democratic Republic of Congo stands ready to provide assistance if so requested by national judicial authorities. And in Bangladesh, we wanted to let you know that Acting Emergency Relief Coordinator Joyce Masuya has allocated $4 million from the UN's own Central Emergency Response Fund. And that money will be used to support the response to the floods that have impacted nearly 6 million men, women, and children in Bangladesh since late last month. So far, a reported 500,000 people have been displaced in more than 3,400 evacuation shelters. Over 7,000 schools are closed due to the flooding, impacting about 1.7 million young people who just want to go to school. The floods are also caused an estimated $156 million in losses in livestock and in fisheries. We, along with our humanitarian partners, are mobilized in supporting the government-led flood response. We're also helping with local efforts to help the most vulnerable people in communities impacted by these floods. This is the 4th major climate-related disaster to hit Bangladesh just this year. Since the end of May, nearly 13 million people across about a land that covers about 30% of Bangladesh have been impacted by Cyclone Ramal. Northeastern and northern floods, and now these devastating flash floods. I want to flag a report by the International Labour Organization on something that's of interest to all of us, and that is jobs. ILO today revealed that there's a decline in the labor income share, which represents the proportion of total income earned by workers in an economy. These findings are based on data collected over the past 2 decades. ILO says this worsens inequality around the world. The challenges are notably facing young people in the job market, as a large share of youth remains out of unemployment, education, or training. ILO calls on countries to put in place policies that promote an equitable distribution of economic benefits. Programming note, tomorrow we will have our dynamic food duo join you, and that is Maximo Torero, Chief Economist at the Food and Agricultural Organization, and Arif Hussein, the Chief Economist at the World Food Program. And they will be joined by a third person, so that will make it more than a duo, and that is Victor Aguayo, the Director of Child Nutrition Development at the UN Children's Fund. They will be here to brief you on the Global Report on Food Crisis 2024. More money in the bank from 2 countries, meaning there is a quiz. 2 African countries paid their dues. Geographically, one nation is a volcanic archipelago of 4 island states in the Indian Ocean, as we would call it, waterlocked country, with fewer than 1 million people. The second country is the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa, where over 100 million people live. What binds them together, besides both paying their dues today, is that both their currencies are called the franc, though with their countries' names.
Mauritius?
Nope. Nope. Okay, you're all okay. You're not going to go through all of them. We thank our friends in Moroni, in the Comoros, and in Kinshasa, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. 129 member states, the Comoro franc and the Congolese franc. Okay, speaking of money, I'm ready to take questions in exchange for some.
That's a good deal.
That's yes, Deji, please. That was a joke for those who read the
I thought I'm
transcript
going
later.
to ask this question, the last one, so I can say it's the last question, but anyway. Yesterday, the Ukraine's ambassador to Japan, Sergei Korsunsky, paid homage to a controversial place, Yasukuni Jinja, where over 1,000 convicted war criminals from the Pacific War were enlisted, including 14 convicted Class A crimes. What does the Secretary General has to say on his visit?
I think that's an issue that is, I guess, a regional question, but it is not for us to comment.
No,
Yep.
I haven't finished yet. Sorry, yeah, that's not my last question. So, on the official Twitter account, they posted tweet and said that the ambassador is to pay his respects to those who lost their lives in service to their country. So, war criminals are those who lost their lives in service to their country. Does the Secretary General agree on
Look,
that?
I am not going to comment on an issue that needs to be dealt with within member states.
Well, in 2013, the former UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, issued a statement when talking about this issue. He said he stresses the need to be sensitive to the feelings of others, especially memory of victims, and focus on building mutual trust and stronger partnership.
I have no, I think those sentiments still hold today.
So the
I
Secretary
will leave
General
it, I've answered your question to the best of my ability. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of days ago, the Secretary General delivered remarks at an event, a workshop in China regarding capacity building for artificial intelligence. A segment of his remark drew my attention specifically when he said that 80% of the Sustainable Development Goals could be achieved with the assistance of artificial intelligence. My question is, what does the Secretary General see as the areas of priority across the 17 goals that artificial intelligence can be first implemented right away, and second, can yield the best results?
I think, the Secretary General's point is that artificial intelligence can be a tremendous force for good. But it has high risk, and we've already seen it, to do tremendous damage. And that's why he put together this, the panel. That's why member states are debating the digital compact. I mean, this is an issue that that we are very much seized of, that also demands the work of the voices of industry and other stakeholders. What is clear is that artificial intelligence in technology, whether it's agriculture and health, just to speak of two, which are very much part, and climate change, climate adaptation, which are very much part of the Sustainable Development Goals, can help boost our efforts to meet those targets. Madame.
Thank you, Stefan. On Cyprus issue, it is reported in Cyprus that the trilateral meeting at UN may happen possibly in October. Cyprus, we know that it's possible on that, but Turkish Cypriots don't seem to accept it. Could you confirm the reports? What does the Secretary General recommend?
Well, the Secretary General is continuing to consider the possibility of inviting the two Cypriot leaders for a joint meeting to discuss the next steps on the Cyprus issue, these so-called trilateral meetings. It's something obviously we've been thinking about, but we're continuing to consider. I think what needs to be made clear is that no invitations have been sent out to date.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your lack of questions.